When I was a child, our house had a small room on the first floor that was rarely ever used. It was tucked away in a corner beside the kitchen, furnished only with a recliner, a small table, and an old brown sofa that had long lost its color. There was nothing special about that room. But somehow, ever since I was little, I always felt that its atmosphere was a bit strange. The room was cold, even during the day. Its damp smell never went away, and every time I walked past it, the hair on my arms would stand up. But I thought it was just a child's imagination. Until one day, I realized that something was truly hiding there, something alive. That day was a Wednesday. I remember clearly because that morning I didn't go to school. I had a slight fever, so my mother told me to rest at home, while my father and younger brother went out as usual. The house was very quiet, only the ticking of the clock and the occasional sound of wind slipping through the window. Around 10:30 a.m., I heard something, soft footsteps downstairs. I immediately stopped reading my comic book. The sound was heavy and distinct, like someone walking without trying to hide it. I thought maybe my mother had forgotten something at home and had just returned from work. So I went down the stairs slowly, calling out, "Mom." But there was no answer. I walked toward the kitchen, and when I reached the doorway, the world seemed to stop. Standing there was a tall man. His clothes were tattered, his hair messy as if it had never been combed, and his skin was filthy, covered in dark stains. His eyes were empty, completely expressionless, staring straight at me as though I wasn't human, but something else. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My breath caught in my throat. The only thing I could hear was the pounding of my heart so loud it felt like it echoed through the entire house. We stared at each other in silence for a few seconds, though it felt like hours. Then suddenly, it was as if I woke up from a nightmare. I turned and ran upstairs as fast as I could. I went into my room, locked the door, and dragged the wardrobe in front of it. My hands were shaking as I pressed the buttons on the house phone. I called my mother, crying hysterically. In a panicked voice, she said, "Lock your door. Call the police right now." About 15 minutes later, 2 police cars stopped in front of the house. I heard their footsteps entering, the crackle of their radios, and short commands like, "Check the back room," or "Search the kitchen." I stayed hidden in my room until finally an officer knocked on the door and said everything was safe. I came out, still trembling, and watched them search each room one by one, but the result was nothing. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no open doors, no footprints on the floor. As if that man had simply vanished into thin air. One of the officers suggested that maybe I had been mistaken because of my fever. But before they left, one of the younger officers suddenly stopped in front of the small room beside the kitchen. He pointed to something sticking out from under the old sofa, a Walmart plastic bag. When they pulled it out, the stench hit us instantly. Under that sofa, they found piles of rotten food, fast food wrappers, empty water bottles, and even a plastic bag filled with urine. That room wasn't just empty, someone had been living there. The police concluded that the man I saw had most likely been hiding in our house for weeks, sneaking in quietly through an unlocked back door and turning that small room into his shelter. After that incident, my father immediately cleared everything out of that room. The old sofa was thrown away, the floor was scrubbed clean, and the room was transformed into a bright breakfast nook with wooden chairs. No more sofa, no more place to hide. But every time I wake up in the middle of the night and hear the faintest sound from downstairs, for some reason my mind always drifts back to that moment. I imagine, what if I had gone down just a little bit earlier? What if I had called out to my mother louder? Or what if that man hadn't just stared at me? Sometimes when I sit in our dining area, now bright and filled with morning light, I can still clearly remember the damp smell of that room and the empty look on his face. And every time I wake up in the dead of night, hearing faint noises from below, I can't help but wonder, was he ever really gone? Weeks passed after that terrifying day. The house felt different now, cleaner, brighter, yet somehow the silence had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, like the air itself remembered what had happened. Even though the police said he was gone, deep down, I could still feel him. Every time I walked past that little breakfast nook that used to be the small room, I could almost sense eyes following me from somewhere. Sometimes, at night, I'd wake up to faint creaks on the floorboards below. I'd hold my breath, listening, 1 step, 2 steps, then nothing. I'd tell myself it was just the house settling, or maybe a dream, but I knew better. Then one night, almost a month later, something happened that made me sure he had never left. It was around 2 a.m. The house was completely dark. My parents and brother were asleep, and I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to rest. Suddenly, I heard it again, that slow, deliberate walking on the first floor. Step, step, step. I froze. The sound wasn't coming from the hallway this time. It was coming from underneath the floor. Right below my room. I sat up, listening closely. Then came another sound, something dragging, like fabric against wood. My throat went dry. I grabbed my phone and quietly sent a message to my mom's number. Someone's downstairs again. I waited. The house went silent again, until a soft knocking came from the direction of the breakfast nook. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't on the door. It was under the floorboards. That was the moment my father woke up. I heard his footsteps rush down the hall, followed by the sound of a drawer opening. He had taken his baseball bat. He signaled me to stay in my room, then went downstairs. The lights flicked on one by one. I heard him shouting, "Who's there?" Then, a loud crash. The sound of something heavy falling over. My mother screamed from the hallway, and I ran to the top of the stairs. Down below, my father was standing in the breakfast nook, staring at the floor, at a section of wooden boards that had been pried loose from underneath. And from that dark opening beneath the floor came a pair of pale, trembling hands. The police arrived within minutes. When they pulled him out, I finally saw him again, the same man I had seen in the kitchen that morning. He was thinner now, filthy, barely conscious. His eyes darted around the room, wild and unfocused, but when they met mine, he smiled. A faint, broken smile, like he remembered me. They said he'd been hiding in the crawl space under our floor ever since the first search, living there, stealing food at night, listening to us walk above him. Inside that space, the police found more trash bags, a flashlight, half-eaten food, and a small stack of our missing belongings. My brother's shoes, my dad's work gloves, even an old family photo that had vanished from the living room. The officer told us later that the man was homeless and likely mentally unstable, but no one could explain how he had managed to stay hidden for so long, or why he kept returning after the police first came. Sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I still hear it, faintly, a dragging sound from beneath the floor. And I can't help but wonder, what if he wasn't the only one down there?